Am I the asshole for locking my boyfriend out of my apartment when I had a migraine? This happened last night and I've been dealing with the fallout all day. On mobile, so sorry for the formatting. There's some background info you all need to know. First one. I live on my own too. My boyfriend has a key to my place but I have sliding lock for extra security. 3. I suffer from chronic migraines. On to the story. Yesterday I worked a rather long and stressful shift, and when I got home I could feel the beginning of a migraine coming on. I did my best to stop it, drinking lots of water, avoiding screens, taking pain meds etc. But around 7 p.m. I knew there was no hope. It was coming. Usually when I get them this bad the only thing that helps is taking a sleeping pill, getting an ice pack and putting in my earplugs and heading to bed. I texted my boyfriend giving him a heads up how I was feeling and what I was doing, because he was going to come over after he was done work. When I go to sleep alone in my place I always put the sliding lock on because I'm a woman who lives alone. Safety, right? Well, apparently my boyfriend had left his good charger for his phone at my place and wanted to pop over and get it after work. He had texted me a bunch but obviously I didn't respond because I was sleeping. He figured he could let himself in, grab the charger and leave without my knowing. I should also point out that he's for sure allowed to do this. He has a key for a reason and he's let himself in before, telling me he was doing so because he left something there or needed to borrow something. Well, last night he couldn't get in. He apparently tried the lock a few times but because I had the sliding lock he couldn't open the door. He tried knocking a few times and even called me, but as I mentioned before I usually wear earplugs when I have a migraine so I can sleep undisturbed. The woman in the apartment next me heard all of this and I guess called the cops for an attempted break-in. They showed up and I guess my boyfriend managed to convince them he wasn't some psycho and was in fact allowed in my place and they left. Regardless, he was so mad. I woke up this morning to a barrage of texts calling me an asshole for locking door. And what was the point of me giving him my key if I was just going to lock him out whenever I wanted? He was so mad and embarrassed about the cop thing and chewed me out over that as well. I tried explaining what happened on my end but he wouldn't budge and said I owed him an apology. Now, where I think I might be the asshole is I never actually waited for him to respond before going to sleep, nor did I tell him I would be using the sliding lock. I figured he should know my habits well enough by now. So am I the asshole for not telling my boyfriend I was locking the extra lock and he couldn't come in? Edit. First off, thank you all for the wonderful advice and support. I didn't respond to everyone but it was wonderful. Shout out to the one dude who threatened in my DM though. My boyfriend came over this morning and we had a long talk. He admitted he totally overreacted and apologized for blaming me. We ended up agreeing to have him give me my key back in the meantime because we clearly need to work on our communication skills with each other. He did come over with an iced coffee and treat to say sorry. How much is a charger? How old is he and what does he do? I mean, come on. Not the asshole if you're having issues and he can't cope. He can buy another charger or just buy a cord and hook it up to any computer. Some cars also have USB ports these days. You can get them at Walmart or Walgreens or any store or gas station for like $10-15. You may have given him a key, but it's not his name on the lease, so you can say no when you want to and if you've had a bad day. Not the asshole. Migraines hit like a freight train, and the extra lock is an understandable security measure. I get him being pissed about dealing with the cops, but that's not on you. You're asking if you're the asshole because you used your apartment in a way that benefits you? And your boyfriend was inconvenienced because he forgot something. And your world didn't revolve around providing him with his needs? Heck no. Not the asshole. Yeah. As a woman alone you use the extra locks on your door. And you didn't want to be disturbed because you had a migraine. He should understand that. And when he realized your door was locked he should have just gone home without his good charger. You do not owe him an apology. You texted him that you had a migraine and were going to sleep. Yet he still thought it was okay to knock on the door and phone you because he couldn't live without his stupid charger, not even his only charger, for one night? That's incredibly inconsiderate. Just because you gave him the key doesn't mean you gave him the right to disregard you and your needs in your apartment. You gave him a heads up about going to bed. All consequences later, including cops being called, are entirely on his shoulders. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. Run far, run fast. He's waving huge red flags here. He knew you were ill and needed sleep, yet he pounds on the door and yells. He couldn't support you so far as to use a less preferred charger for one night. His action led to the police being called, Yet he takes zero responsibility for that and, worse, blames you for what he did. This is one of the warning signs of an abuser. Last straw, he doesn't care about your safety. He called you names for locking your door when you were ill and had your eyes and ears blocked. He literally doesn't care if you get robbed or killed, as long as he doesn't have to wait to get his toys. Not the asshole. I can't imagine freaking out over something like that. If I were in his place, I'd probably knock a few times and then just go, "Oh well," and leave. Not the asshole. You did something without thinking that was so basic that anyone would have done on autopilot without telling anyone. He should have stopped after realizing the door was locked and you had a migraine. Not the asshole, you gave him a heads up. And you were sick. If he has a good charger, then he has more than one and could have used the other one instead of making a scene at your door when he realized it was locked. I get he's embarrassed and that sucks about the cops, but how long was he out there and what kinda noise was he making for the cops to be called and get there to deal with him? You didn't do anything on purpose. I hope he asked how you are feeling today. Am I the asshole for depending on my wealthy roommates while I suffer from a sudden lack of income? I, 21F, live with two of my good friends, 21M, 22N. They are both from wealthy and stable families. Meanwhile, I'm only attending our expensive school because I got a full ride, and financial aid is how I've been supporting myself. At first, N roommate suggested they handle our grocery shopping and us splitting the cost, and we agreed. The first problem arose when my abusive mother refused to submit my financial aid forms this year. This was after she kicked me out of her house at the height of the pandemic, leaving me with nowhere to go. Since I was no longer in school, I didn't receive the financial aid that I'd been using. From March to June, I haven't been able to pay rent or other bills. In these few months, I've tried applying to many jobs in my area and also talking with my school to let me back in, with little success so far. My N roommate has become increasingly agitated with me, as they've taken the brunt of my financial fallout by paying for me. They recently told me that I was entitled, and went on to ask if I felt guilty for asking people to pay for things for me. When I replied, "Of course I do," they said, "Then why do you still do it?" It made me frustrated with myself for being a burden on them. They then declared that we would now all be buying our own groceries, and that since they did all of the grocery shopping, the food and pantry staples we had were theirs, and my other roommate and I would need to get our own food, leaving us with nothing. Other roommate has now volunteered to take over my expenses. This made N even angrier, and they said that he shouldn't let me take advantage of him, that it wasn't fair to him that I was taking from him. M replied that he didn't mind since his parents are rich, and that he would be the judge of whether I'm using him or not. N roommate blocked us both on Facebook and hasn't spoken to us since. I know I don't have much room to be offended. They've paid my bills for 4 months because they care about me and don't want me to struggle, and I believe it's a reasonable response to be at least a little upset that nothing has changed in all this time. But a tiny part of me is still upset. They have 2 loving and rich parents, and whenever they need help, they have somewhere and someone to go to. They've never worked a job that wasn't handed to them, yet they act like me not having a job right now is a choice I'm making. I would at least expect a friend who idealizes themselves as a socialist to not think that I wake up every day and decide to be an inconvenience. Too long did not read. My roommate has been supporting me financially while I recover from a sudden setback, and after a few months are telling our mutual friends that I'm taking advantage of them and am intentionally not getting a job. They've also denied us food that previously had been communal, leaving us to fend for ourselves. I think this is excessive, even with their frustration being justified, and am upset with them talking behind my back. Am I the asshole? You are the asshole. Just because they got the cash doesn't mean they need to support you. You need to figure it out. You are the asshole. Just because they're rich, it doesn't mean that they can buy you everything. They're not obligated to do so. You do seem entitled. NTA for accepting help from M when it was offered. But absolutely you are the asshole for thinking you have access to anything including the house without paying for it. The food is only communal because everyone was paying for it. These other roommates, M included, have zero responsibility to do anything for you, no matter if they are millionaires or broke. This is the definition of entitled. You are entitled to nothing they have. Having said that, M is being kind and helping you. You owe M huge, and I hope you're expressing your gratitude. As best I can tell, you are not at fault for getting stuck in the situation you're in, and I'm sorry you are. Regardless, no one is ever responsible for your affairs but you. You are the asshole. No one owes you a living. You are so entitled. Have you gone to the state for aid? So they shouldn't complain about taking care of you because they come from wealthy families? Who do you think you are? You are the asshole. It's no one else's job to support you. This is a sticky situation, but yeah, at this point you are the asshole. I am in the same situation as you, with few differences, and guess what, loans are out there. Just because their parents have money doesn't mean you get to be their dependent. Take out a loan and take responsibility for yourself. You are the asshole. It is not your roommate's job to finance your life. What did you do to show gratitude for them providing free food and housing? Did you at least take over the majority of the household chores to make up for being a non-contributor? XG. Info. It's weird that N is so upset about what someone else is doing with their money, but it's understandable they've grown frustrated with this situation. On the other hand, have you looked into forms of aid that aren't tied to your enrollment in school? For instance, if you have no income, you can generally find a food pantry that will provide assistance. Am I the asshole for telling my best friend that she isn't the biggest priority in my life anymore? My best friend, L, and I, both 22 female, have been best friends since we were about 3. We have a large friendship group with 10 other girls. L has always been a massive part of my life. Her mother died during childbirth and her dad has struggled with alcoholism pretty much her entire life. So my parents always did their best to remove her from that situation as much as possible, and we were practically inseparable as kids. Elle has always had pretty bad attachment issues, and really struggles to form connections with anybody outside our childhood friendship group. She has however been in a relationship for about a year and doing really well. This has never had a major impact on my life until this past year. In June of last year, I bought a dog with my boyfriend, and obviously many adjustments came with this. I couldn't spend as much time as usual with her or the rest of my friends, but this had little impact on our friendship and I still saw her weekly. Whenever my friends would bring up the topic of my boyfriend and I having kids, Elle would pretty much immediately interject and say, "Let's not be doing that anytime soon," and we would all laugh it off as I wasn't planning on kids being in the near future. In September of last year I found out I was almost 8 weeks pregnant. It was a massive shock, but our daughter was born in late March. Whilst I was pregnant, my friends all joked that Elle would majorly struggle to adjust and that she would have issues with not having as much attention as she's used to. I hate to admit it, because I love Elle, but that is exactly what's happened. She messages the group chat our friends share pretty much every day asking if anybody is available to do anything, and when I don't respond immediately, she gets annoyed and tells me that I've known her longer than my baby and should balance my time better. My birthday was last week, and when she messaged asking if I was arranging anything, she was dissatisfied with my response being just chilled drinks in the garden with our friends as she wanted to go out. Before I had my daughter, she would message me any time with her problems, which I didn't mind, but now I just do not have the energy to be her therapist. It all came to a head yesterday when Elle and 3 of our other friends came to my house. Elle asked if we should go on some kind of holiday this year and I said I'd love to, but with having a new baby I don't know if I'd be able to afford it. She rolled her eyes and made a comment under her breath. I was admittedly very sleep deprived and asked her what her problem was. She said that my daughter was. This to me wasn't acceptable, and I told her that she had to accept that we're grown adults now and she isn't my main priority anymore. She pretty much broke down and called her boyfriend, asking him to pick her up. My friends called me an asshole and said I could have gone about what I said differently, but we're 22 and it really isn't my fault that she's incapable of adjusting to change. Am I the asshole? Not the asshole. You have a baby, so obviously your number one priority is going to be taking care of a kid. Your friend needs to accept that people grow up, get jobs, get married, have kids, etc., and cannot be there for them 24/7. Not the asshole. I find it hilarious that they didn't have an issue with her saying your daughter was her problem but thought you could have handled it better. You need to sit down with her and tell her what is and isn't acceptable to you regarding how she talks about your child. Let her know where she stands in the relationship so she isn't confused. Be honest and straightforward with her. How dare you make your baby your biggest priority? You've known your friend since you were a baby yourself. Not the asshole. She is petty for having beef with a baby. Not the asshole. And maybe I'm taking this too far, but you need to cut this girl off for at least a couple years. She is outwardly showing jealousy towards a defenseless baby. She literally told you that she has a problem, and that problem is your baby. Your baby who, if left alone with this woman for even a minute, could not protect themselves. Until your child is older or this girl gets some therapy, just stop seeing her. I could be 1000% wrong, but is that a risk worth taking? Edit. Just because I feel like this may be an unpopular opinion after reading more replies. Do y'all realize how crazy it is to have beef with a baby? WHOTF tells a new mother they have a problem with the baby because of jealousy. Could you have phrased it better? Probably. Are you correct that your child is your main priority now? Absolutely. Not the asshole. She gets annoyed and tells me that I've known her longer than my baby and should balance my time better. And #X200B. Not the asshole. WTF? This statement alone shows how entitled or delusional she is. She acts like the baby is a new acquaintance you have been blowing her off for. It's bonkers that she can't see the difference. So not the asshole. Of course she isn't your main priority. Your friends are absurd for thinking you should pretend otherwise. She should deal with her issues. Am I the asshole for essentially telling someone she doesn't have the right to be triggered by me? I, 22NB, have been diagnosed with EUPD, also known as borderline personality disorder, by several therapists in my life, and have been in and out of therapy since I was 16. My latest attempt at therapy is NHS Zoom group therapy, where we have nothing in common but we're all separately recommended group therapy and thus grouped together. One thing this group loves to do is bitch about their parents being narcissists and say things like, "That's what narcissists do. They're just mean and they don't care about you," etc. I have not been formally diagnosed with NPD, but I have a lot of comorbidity with narcissism because it's another cluster B disorder like EUPD, so it can be upsetting to constantly hear that I'm an inherently bad person and so on, especially in a therapy space. About 2 weeks ago, I admitted to having BPD and narcissistic tendencies in the group to offer a counter-narrative, because the way they were talking about narcissism and PD started to feel less therapeutic and more ableist. I said I had recognized something was really wrong with me and it was the reason I had sought out therapy in the first place, because I don't want to be a bad person to be around. One girl in the group, I am the youngest by a few years but she is the second youngest, starts openly sobbing, saying that a narcissist had entered the chat, and that she didn't feel safe in the group anymore because of me. This was week 14 of the group and she has never had any problem with me before, but now that I have given my disorder a name, she starts crying. Obviously this made me feel really bad, not for her, but for me, because I had admitted something I physically couldn't help about myself and she had responded by crying because I'm so awful to be around. The session had to end there and I was in tears too, but trying to hold it together, and I spent the whole next week disoriented and upset. At the next session I tried to explain that I understand that she had suffered abuse from a narcissist in the past, but that doesn't give her the right to profile me and get emotional simply because I am existing around her as a person with a cluster B disorder. Nobody in the therapy group really understood my point of view and mostly fussed over her, saying she couldn't help being triggered, and she said that I hadn't done anything wrong, but she refused to feel empathy for me in the future. All my friends think I was in the right and that it's a person's own responsibility to adapt to being triggered by something when the thing in question is bigoted. But the therapist, other members of the group didn't really agree. I had to drop it eventually, and now everyone thinks I'm okay with going to group therapy with someone who has openly admitted she doesn't feel safe with me there. Am I the asshole for wanting her to not be triggered by me? I know it's difficult to control, I have my own triggers, but none of them are against a minority social group lol, so this is uncharted territory for me. The therapist a sasshole for not controlling and directing, but both you and the girl are mostly but not quite nah. You can't help your disorder, but conversely she can't help her triggers, and it's totally unfair to say she doesn't have the right to be triggered. By doing so you are insisting that being triggered is a conscious, even deliberate choice, and showing a disrespect that I'm sure you would hate being shown if someone insisted you didn't have the right to be EUPD. She didn't choose to be hurt by a narcissist, and she's not being bigoted. Basically, you are probably incompatible in the group, more so if you have an inadequate therapist. In fact, given what you say about the group's talk before they knew, I'd say this is the wrong group for you, and I hope you find a better one. No assholes here. You should never have been lumped into a group of people who have been traumatized by narcissists for group therapy. You have a right to therapy and help tackling this issue without being attacked for having the issue in the first place. Victims of narcissists have a right to therapy with the presence of a narcissist. The only real assholes here are whoever made this stupid fucking decision to group you with them, and the therapist who is refusing to do his fucking job. Info. And where is the actual therapist in all this? This group sounds like a terrible group. You need to find a trauma therapist who specializes in personality disorders, and probably for now need one-to-one counseling. So she heard about your mental health problems and instead of trying to relate or sympathize made it all about her. Isn't that narcissistic? And you, conversely, acknowledge you have some issues and, quite bravely, open up in a group that is hostile to those issues in an attempt to be a better person to be around? Holy shit, absolutely not the asshole. You are the asshole you don't get to tell people what feelings they are allowed to have. Not the asshole. Why isn't the therapist leading the group therapy so that it happens under as good circumstances as possible for everyone? You are there for a reason just as everyone else. It's not fair that it's viewed as wrong for you to open up about your perspective. But isn't it triggering for you to hear the whole group talk badly about something that you are trying to come to terms with? Why are you censored during therapy and they are not? I hope that you'll find a therapy group that makes you feel welcome and comfortable to openly bring up things. Hopefully with a therapist that is good at knowing how to navigate and steer the group better. No assholes here except whoever grouped you together and the therapist. You can't help your diagnosis and it's great you're seeking help, but she can't help her triggers. You should never have been put in group therapy with someone triggered by any indication of narcissism.